Josh Hasten here, Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. It is Monday morning, January the 14th, 2019, the 8th of Shvat, 5779. Hope you're doing well in your part of the world. Don't forget, you can always get in touch with me during the week, Josh at thelandofisrael.com. On Facebook, it's Joshua Hasten, and on Twitter at Josh Hasten. I actually also just started a new page on Facebook. It's called Josh Hasten Israel Advocacy and Journalism, another outlet in which I plan to use to post different articles that I'm writing, in addition to these podcasts and other pro-Israel advocacy information. So go give it a like, give it a follow. Again, Josh Hasten, Israel Advocacy and Journalism, a brand new page which I just created on Facebook. We're going to get to the news here on the program because, as always, a lot to discuss here in Israel and throughout the Middle East. Times of Israel reports, after Israel struck 2 targets in northern Gaza on Saturday night, the Hamas terror group, which rules the territory, warned the Jewish state against a dangerous escalation. So Saturday night, Israel, the military carried out airstrikes in response to yet another rocket launched by somebody in Gaza, one of the terror groups in Gaza. The rocket landed in Israeli territory, and thank God there were no injuries. But wait a minute, I thought we had a ceasefire, right? So much for the ceasefire. Anyone who's lived in Israel long enough or has been following the story down on Israel's southern border with Gaza knows there's no such thing as a ceasefire. Just several days ago, Hamas sent over a huge explosive device attached to a bunch of balloons, and that's how this latest round started, even though we were supposed to have a ceasefire. What a joke that is. So again, IDF fighters targeted 2 of Hamas's underground structures in Gaza. The IDF said in a statement, "We will continue operating to defend Israeli citizens." The rocket that prompted the airstrikes landed in an open field. As I said, no damages or injuries. The mayor of the Sdot Negev Regional Council, Tamir Eidan, calling on the government to respond more harshly to rocket launches from Gaza. On Friday, this past Friday, another one of these so-called Great March of Returns took place. 13,000 Arabs participating in, it says here, demonstrations. I would call them violent attempted infiltrations into Israel, rock throwing, firebombs, grenades being thrown at Israeli troops, burning tires, trying to breach the security fence. Israel, of course, responding as necessary. The Air Force attacked 2 Hamas posts on Friday in response to that violence. An Israeli soldier was lightly injured by a rock throughout Friday's events. 1 Arab was killed. This part of the story is insane here. Again, I'm still referring to this Times of Israel article. In recent days, Hamas has ramped up its threats of renewed violence along the Gaza border after Israel halted the transfer of $15 million of Qatari funds to the terror group. The funds are part of a series of 6 $15 million deposits Israel is allowing to Qatar to make there in Gaza. So again, on one hand, we say that we are fighting the terror, we're attacking their underground structures, attacking empty buildings, attacking different Hamas operational centers. And on the other hand, we are allowing, in theory, this one was delayed, Qatar to send over these $15 million in cash payments over to Hamas, which of course they're supposed to use to help their people over there. Yet every time we transfer things over to Hamas or allow the transfer of goods and services and money or whatnot, they just use them to build more tunnels, more of these incendiary devices, launch more rockets, on and on. So I don't understand the logic which goes into allowing these money transfers. Former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, now that he's no longer in business says that the government should not be transferring the money. It'll only be used for Hamas's terrorist activities. I agree with him, but the question I have for the former defense minister is now he's going to speak up. I mean, he threatened before he was defense minister that if he would get the job, that he would take out the head of Hamas within 48 hours. That never happened. And here we are in election cycle, so of course it's a game of politics, criticizing the Israeli government, saying they're not doing enough. I'm not saying I disagree with Lieberman. I agree with him that Israel shouldn't transfer money over to Hamas or allow money to be transferred over to Hamas. Yet, where was he when he was the Minister of Defense and they were firing hundreds of rockets at Israeli population centers? So, again, politics. It's all about politics. As I mentioned before, a week ago, Hamas officials decided they were going to continue this, the launching of these incendiary devices. They had a meeting with the heads of what's called, they actually have a kite unit. A kite unit. Those who are behind launching of these dangerous weapons, which thank God, I mean, they've burned so many fields down in the south, but thank God, some of these devices have been found outside of nursery schools. Nothing serious has happened, but I don't know how much longer we need to take the risk of not doing what needs to be done in order to combat the threat of these incendiary kites and balloons and whatnot. At that meeting, the Hamas meeting, the unit, this kite unit, they received a new budget to prepare for the next round of violence. But wait a minute, I thought we had a ceasefire. It's all a joke. There is no ceasefire. They're getting ready on the other side, preparing their strategies as to how they're going to attack the Jewish state. Speaking of attacks, on Friday, I actually didn't get this information until after Shabbat, Saturday night. This happened just at the beginning of Shabbat. IDF soldiers foiled a stabbing terror attack next to the Givat Ha'avot neighborhood in Kiryat Arba. You can go online. You can actually see the Arab terrorist, trying to attack anyone in sight there, the soldiers and other personnel, security personnel from Kiryat Arba. And the terrorist was then shot, and he was killed. But nobody was injured in the attack there at the beginning of Shabbat in Kiryat Arba. You can go check out the pictures and the videos online if you can stomach it. But here you have a jihadist armed with a knife trying to murder and getting what he deserved. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, as reported by the Jerusalem Post, took responsibility on Sunday for Saturday attacks at the Damascus airport. Israel hit Iranian arms warehouses at the airport over the past 36 hours. Again, that would be Friday and into Saturday, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, in a rare admission that Israel was taking part in these strikes against Syria, or Iranian targets in Syria. Now, our outgoing Army Chief Eisenkot said something on the radio the other day, hinting that the Prime Minister should not admit that Israel's behind these strikes. Yet the Prime Minister decided to open his cabinet meeting Sunday morning and announced that Israel was, in fact, behind that strike, and that Israel has taken action against Hezbollah and Iranian targets hundreds of times. What's interesting, though, is even though Eisenkot seemed to criticize the Prime Minister for mentioning that Israel was taking part in these strikes, in a New York Times interview, Eisenkot himself said that Israel had dropped 2,000 bombs on Iranian and Syrian targets in Syria in 2018 alone. So I'm not sure why he's hinting that our Prime Minister shouldn't mention anything about attacking Syria, yet he told the New York Times that Israel's in fact attacking Syria. Again, politics, baby. Politics is behind everything around here. The accumulated number of recent attacks, said the Prime Minister, proves that we are determined more than ever to act against Iran in Syria. This Netanyahu telling his cabinet on Sunday morning. In other related news, also in the Jerusalem Post, the IDF uncovered a sixth Hezbollah tunnel, completing what was called Operation Northern Shield. The tunnel, which had been dug at a depth of 55 meters, that's 180 feet below the ground, was the most important one detected since the operation began in December. Again, we're talking about Hezbollah in the north, digging underground tunnels, trying to reach Israeli communities, and trying to carry out acts of terror and murder, going into the closest community. We've seen it with Hamas, and now Hezbollah trying the same tactics, trying to attack Israeli communities on the northern border. But the finding of the sixth tunnel now ends this Operation Northern Shield. But the question really is, even though this military operation is apparently over, how many tunnels are still being dug? And what will Israel do in the near future in order to quash this threat of terror tunnels being dug from Lebanon into northern Israel? And here the J-Post reports, while the military announced the end of the operation, it noted that it is simultaneously monitoring several locations where Hezbollah is still digging underground. I wonder what they're digging underground. So my question is, how is the operation over if we know Hezbollah is still digging underground? Bottom line, it is not over. This is probably just the beginning. The IDF, it says, will also continue a broad defense effort along the Lebanese border to ensure Hezbollah does not try to dig future tunnels into Israel by integrating various means such as the ongoing construction of the border wall with Lebanon. So now we have a border wall in Egypt. We have the separation fence barrier in Judea and Samaria. And here comes another wall, more walls. That's all we need is more walls, right? I personally am against all of these walls. I know that the southern wall, or fence, if you will, has prevented the illegal immigration from North African countries. I know that's brought that down to a pretty much a standstill. But these other fences, I know I was down there on the Gaza border to see this new technological fence going in, underground fence, above ground fence, sensors and all the rest. But we are just building. So much money is being used to put these Band-Aids up all over the country, now in the north as well, to build these fences, but not solve the problem. And again, this is not the same situation on our northern border and Judea and Samaria. It's not the same situation as the wall that the President of the United States wants to erect on the Mexican border. Our southern fence or wall is probably the most similar in terms of the purpose or whatnot. But a lot of these other fences are basically Band-Aids. It means we're not going to solve the problem. We're going to kick the can down the road and see what Hezbollah does next. I mean, that's the bottom line. Let's talk some legal issues here I'd like to discuss, and kind of disturbing, to put it mildly. Jerusalem Post reports that terrorist gets 18 years for the murder of a British student on the Jerusalem light rail. Jamil Tamimi was sentenced to 18 years in prison by the Jerusalem District Court on Thursday in a plea deal for the murder of Hannah Bladon, a 20-year-old British exchange student who was stabbed to death in April 2017 on the Jerusalem light rail. 18 years. That's all for murder? That's all. That's all this guy gets. He doesn't get the death sentence. He doesn't get life in prison. He gets 18 years, which, for him may sound like a lot, but he is now 57. So in other words, he'll be released, and then there's good behavior, perhaps. I don't know. He'll be released in his mid-70s. So what did the court decide? While it was found that the terrorist, Tamimi, could differentiate between right and wrong, it was also found that he was mentally unstable, leading to the expected reduced sentence. According to the indictment filed by the Jerusalem District Court's office, the attack took place extremely close to the Old City, where tens of thousands of visitors were observing Passover and Easter. Again, this is in 2017. He purchased a 30.5 centimeter long knife. Tamimi, who lives, by the way, in Jerusalem, on the day of the murder. Then he called his sons to arrange a visit. Apparently the kids didn't want to see their father. He had already been receiving treatment at a mental health center. And I guess he was so upset that his kids didn't want to see him, he decided to purchase a knife and stab, in this case, I'm not sure if she's Jewish or not, but a tourist on the Jerusalem light rail. That's how he took out his aggression, murder, and yet somehow you only get 18 years in jail. So if you're angry and you take it out on others in the form of murder, only 18 years in prison. Here's another court decision. I believe this is the same court, the Jerusalem District Court, if I'm not mistaken. A terrorist who planned to assassinate the Prime Minister of Israel, he only got 11 years, just 11 years? Why so short a sentence? According to JNS, where I also do a good share of writing, a resident of the Shuafat neighborhood in Jerusalem was convicted of planning terrorist attacks against Prime Minister Netanyahu and other senior officials, including former Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat. He was sentenced for, that's Jerusalem District Court, handed down the sentence for just 11 years. Most of the details are under gag order on this case. Some say he was being handled by terrorists in Syria. They're the ones behind this. He was convicted of charges including aiding the enemy in time of war, conspiracy to commit terrorist acts that would result in murder. He also planned to carry out attacks on buildings owned by the American consulate in Jerusalem and against the delegation of Canadian officials who were in Israel. Yet only 11 years. I'm not exactly sure what this leniency is all about in all of these cases, but it seems like it is a pattern here out of the Jerusalem District Court. Light sentences for those who murder and those who carry out attempted murder or are planning a murder of our prime minister. That's all he got. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. At the same time, the J-Post reports that border police arrested a Palestinian, they call a Palestinian, Saturday night for allegedly firing a weapon at a border police station in the Abu Dis neighborhood, just on the border there of Jerusalem in November. The suspect, a resident of that community of Abu Dis, arrested near Malay Adumim. There were no injuries in the incident that took place in November. Again, he tried to shoot at our troops at border police in his neighborhood there of Abu Dis, and he was, in fact, arrested. This just came off of my email. I just got this now from the NGO Monitor organization. Just printed it out, a press release just here several minutes ago. The title is Anti-Semitism, BDS, and European Funding, the WCC's activists in Israel, and what it says here is the West Bank. The World Council, WCC is the World Council of Churches. They have sent nearly 2,000 activists to Israel since 2002, training them in anti-Israel advocacy and dispatching them to communities around the world. The project is paid for in part by European and other governments, a new report from NGO Monitor finds. So here you have anti-Israel activists getting trained, coming over here and getting training in anti-Israel activity, and then going around and spreading this hate and this anti-Semitism to different communities around the world. The anti-Israel activists are part of the ecumenical accompaniment program in Palestine and Israel. That's the name of the organization, EAPPI, a WCC flagship initiative. Participants are sent to, quote, witness life under occupation. This WCC activity is unique and has no parallel in other conflict zones. In other words, they pretend that they are these humanitarians and care about what they call our people under occupation, which of course is absolute nonsense. Yet they're not active in any other conflicts. They're not helping people in other places around the world. This is clearly just an anti-Israel initiative carried out by the World Council of Churches, WCC. Anybody know about this group? If you know about this group, I don't know too much about this WCC. Feel free to get in touch with me. Let me know who they are, what they're all about. So how does it work? The EAPPI, they misuse tourist visas entering Israel, and they have no legal status here. And despite marketing itself, it says in the report, in the press release rather, as a human rights program, The EAPPI emphasizes political advocacy. NGO Monitor research finds that upon returning to their home countries, many activists engage in anti-Israel demonization, including BDS campaigns, comparing Israel to apartheid South Africa, and, of course, to Nazi Germany, because that's just a cool and popular thing to do, compare Israel to Nazi Germany, right? That happens all the time. The organization at times draws upon theological opposition to Israel's existence and crosses into overt anti-Semitism. So now the information is out there, and the question, I guess, is now for our leaders, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to prevent these haters from coming into Israel and getting a false narrative and then spreading that narrative around the world? So the question is, how do we identify these people and stop them at the border? The World Council of Churches and their EAPPI initiative. That's a question for our government officials, how to stop these people. The New England Patriots, yes, on the field, those who know me, since I am from Indianapolis, I am not a fan of the football team, the New England Patriots. That being said, Bob Kraft, the owner, is what a mensch, what a great human being. He's just been awarded the Genesis Prize. Remember that prize that was given to Natalie Portman last year, and then she boycotted the ceremony and didn't accept it? Remember that? Well, now this year, this is called tshuva, okay, repentance, because the Genesis Prize got it right this time, giving it to Bob Kraft, a wonderful philanthropist and pro-Israel advocate and businessman, and just a great, great human being. So he's getting that award, and I was actually just using that as background to talk about, well, first of all, the Patriots won last night big in the NFL, and their success, of course, continues. Bob Kraft, I heard him say it himself, ever since he started supporting Israel and football in Israel and other projects, his New England Patriots have won 5 Super Bowls. But the focus here is actually on Julian Edelman, one of the players on the team who identifies as being Jewish, and he actually was in Israel. I had the privilege of meeting him as well. I think it was 2 years ago. He came to visit Israel. He was wearing a pair of cleats during one of his recent games. They had a whole campaign called #MyCauseMyCleats, in which the NFL allowed players to design their shoes, their cleats, which they used to play in football games. So you had a lot of players wearing these individually created, specialized cleats. Julian Edelman, when he took the field several weeks ago wearing cleats, he dedicated his artistic design on his shoes to the victims of Pittsburgh's Tree of Life synagogue. And now a California firm has paid $10,000 for those cleats, and they're going to be donating the money to charities in Pittsburgh. The New England Patriots, this reported by Israel National News, the Patriots wide receiver wore the cleats stamped with the words, "The Tree of Life" in Hebrew with an Israeli flag at a December 16th game against Pittsburgh in solidarity with the victims of the October 27th shooting. Golden West Food Group, they purchased the cleats, made the donation to the combined Jewish philanthropies of Greater Boston, and the donation from the sale will then go on to the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh to benefit the victims' families and to help strengthen the city's Jewish community, according to this Boston group. So again, a California firm pays $10,000 for the shoes, donates it to the combined Jewish philanthropies in Boston, and Boston is going to use it to help those in Pittsburgh recovering from this horrific anti-Semitic shooting there at the synagogue in Pittsburgh back in October. But bottom line here is Julian Edelman, whose father is Jewish, has been to Israel, identifies with the Jewish people. He is a true mensch. That him and the owner of the team, as I said before, Bob Kraft, they're just great people. So much respect for Julian Edelman for supporting the victims of the Pittsburgh attack. We are going to end with two different stories here. More good news from Israel. It is actually, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it at the beginning. I mean, it is winter here in Israel. I know it's not the same as winter in New York or Boston or Toronto, wherever you may be listening from. But it is cold here. It is probably about 35, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, about 5 degrees Celsius, more or less. And we've been getting rain, and there's another storm on its way. We're supposed to get maybe some snow in Jerusalem and in mountainous regions in Israel on Wednesday. But what is this doing? This is helping our Kinneret, Lake of Galilee, rise. And according to Ynet, the Kinneret rose 3 more centimeters over the weekend. The Sea of Galilee, it says, or the Kinneret, continued rising over the past few days, gaining an additional 3 centimeters. And again, folks, every centimeter counts. Every little centimeter counts here in the Sea of Galilee. Since the beginning of last week, the Kinneret rose 30.5 centimeters and a total of 53 centimeters since the winter began. This is huge news because we've been experiencing over the last several years a drought here in Israel. This is rain of blessing. There's no other way to look at it. This is a blessing. To receive rain in Israel is such a big deal. The Kinneret still has some work to do. It needs to rise even further. Hopefully this week's predicted rain and snow will assist in the Lake of Galilee rising even more. And finally, more proof how Israel is truly the startup nation and creating unbelievable technologies which are being used around the world, benefiting society. And, I'm a believer that people should love Israel, not just because we're the startup nation, and that Jews should come home to Israel and appreciate Israel because of our biblical heritage and our modern day heritage and everything else that goes with the land of Israel. But this is definitely a plus and a bonus. The fact that Israel is creating these devices in order to improve humanity. And this latest technology is no different. According to the Times of Israel, the Israeli startup Coral Detection Systems unveiled at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas last week a product that it says is able to quickly detect drownings in swimming pools and alert rescuers. The first of its kind hexagonal-shaped device is positioned at the edge of a swimming pool, and it monitors the pool via a built-in underwater video camera that uses computer vision and artificial intelligence to detect movement. The device monitors the pool 24/7 and analyzes what's going on in the water. In case of drowning or dangerous circumstances, the device sounds an alarm to alert people in the vicinity to help the victim and simultaneously sends an alert to the pool's owners via their smartphones. So if, God forbid, something's wrong in your pool, you'll get notification on your phone. It sends an alarm off to alert people in the area. If, God forbid, somebody is drowning, another unbelievable technology made in Israel, folks, made in Israel technology. And I would predict that this device will be introduced at swimming pools all around the world and will save lives. Startup nation, folks. That is what we are, amongst other things. Okay, let's not leave it at that. But this is an amazing technology and another contribution to humanity made in the Jewish state of Israel. And that's all the time we have on today's show here from a blistery and cold, windy Gush Etzion, Israel. My name is Josh Hasten. This is Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. We'd love to get your feedback on shows, on this show, on other shows. I'd love to hear, by the way, if you prefer a type of show like today, where it's mostly news and up-to-date information on Israel, or do you prefer when I interview others, when I have guests on the show, or maybe you like both? I would love to get your feedback. Let me know what you think of the show. You love it, hate it. I'd love constructive criticism. I really, really would appreciate it. So get in touch with me, Josh at thelandofisrael.com. On Facebook, it's Joshua Hasten. Check out, again, my new page there on Facebook called Josh Hasten, Israel Advocacy and Journalism. Check that out on Twitter at Josh Hasten. And thanks to Benjamin Bresky, Tabitha Epstein, and everyone else here at the Land of Israel Network for making these shows a reality. Most importantly, between now and when we speak again, please God, next week, everybody out there in the wonderful world of ours, be safe. Shalom, shalom for January the 14th, 2019, the 8th of Shvat, 5779. Shalom, shalom from Gush Etzion, Israel.
Theater and Theology. Tune in for an interview with Yael Valier, director of the Jerusalem-based theater company.
Which is one of the reasons I prefer to do my plays at the Khan, which, by the way, was built over 1,000 years ago. In the Crusader period, you know that because you're a tour guide. I just love doing shows there. It feels so good.
Listen to the full show on Rejuvenation with Eve Harrow every Sunday on the Land of Israel Network at